I love vegans. They taste like chicken. And I'd love to be a vegan myself, to do my bit for the planet. But if I was going to do that, I think I'd still want to be able to eat beef and chicken, probably fish. And I definitely want to eat bacon. Perhaps you feel the same way about buying an EV. You really like the idea, you want to do your bit for the planet, but you don't want to have to charge it, find charging stations. Actually, it'd be good if you could just still put petrol in it the way you used to. Well, until now, it wasn't possible to buy an EV without the kind of total vegan-like determination. You had to focus on the goal. You were forced to follow Elon Musk's Twitter feed. But Nissan has changed all that with the Qashqai e-Power, a revolutionary new kind of vehicle. It has an electric motor which turns the wheels. That power comes from a battery. The power is put into the battery by a petrol engine which never turns the wheels. Tricky, isn't it? That means you never have to plug it in. It doesn't have a socket, and you can still go to the service station and fill it up with petrol and buy a meat pie. The question is, will you still feel like you're saving the planet though? Well, that all comes down to the fuel economy, and we'll get to that, but it's safe to say it won't be zero. You can, of course, drive in EV-only mode around town, and then the petrol engine will only kick in on longer trips, just like a plug-in hybrid. You can read all about it in my CarsGuide review online, but we've come here to Sweden at the international launch of the new Qashqai to find out what it's like to drive. So what is e-Power? Yes, it does sound like the name of a rave festival, and perhaps that's appropriate because you can think of this as a gateway drug to EVs. Nissan would prefer to call it a stepping stone, but hey, each to their own. The e-Power system combines a 3-cylinder turbocharged 1.5 litre engine, a generator, and a 140 kilowatt electric motor that's similar to what you'd find in a Nissan Leaf EV. And just like an EV, it doesn't have a gearbox, just a single gear for smooth, uninterrupted acceleration. The petrol engine's job is to act as a power plant, generating electricity via a generator, which can then be sent via an inverter to the battery pack, the electric motor, or both at once, depending on the situation. But at no stage does the petrol engine ever turn the wheels. The goal was to create a car that provides the instant, linear and smooth response you get from electric vehicles without the hassle of having to recharge. It also promises around 1,000 kilometres of range, a figure well beyond any current EV on sale. Nissan also put in a few digs at traditional hybrids, pointing out that its e-Power means you don't have to accept the inherent shortcomings, as they put it, of the driving experience you get with a traditional hybrid. What they're pointing to there is the fact that other hybrids sometimes feel a bit confused about which power source is doing what, and the feeling of hesitation and ineptitude is only made worse by the common use of droning CVT gearboxes. Again, the e-Power Qashqai makes do without one of those. In terms of pricing, we don't yet know what the number will be for the more traditional Qashqai range with its petrol engines, so it's hard to speculate yet about what the e-Power version will cost. What we do know is that it will sit at the top of the range, possibly with 2 variants, and will be priced above the normal combustion engine Qashqais. We'd be guessing at an entry price for the e-Power somewhere north of $40,000, with the top spec possibly even nudging $50,000. Still a lot cheaper than an EV then. The combustion engine Qashqai arrives in Australia in Q4 this year, with the e-Power expected to make it early in 2023. My better half has been pestering me to buy one of these for so long that when she first started asking, it was a dualis. Now, aside from the fact that I'm tight and I don't want to form a relationship with just one car, the reason I didn't want to buy it was because it's just a bit dull, or it was. Now this I can come at. I really like the angles, I like the proportions, I like the lines, and I love that powerful V at the front end. And it's a lot better looking than a Duke. I like it. Inside you'll find a whopping 12.3-inch infotainment touchscreen with wireless and wired Apple CarPlay, wired Android Auto, digital radio and satellite navigation, plus a clever and clear 10.8-inch head-up display with mapping. Qashqai is classed as a small SUV, but it feels like there's enough room inside to rival some cars a size above. Part of the reason for that is the new Qashqai has grown in all dimensions, with a new version measuring 4,425mm long, 1,835mm wide, 1,625mm tall, and it sits on a 2,665mm wheelbase. There are big bottle-swallowing door bins, 2 large cup holders, and a wireless phone charging pad. Head and shoulder room are also impressive, front and rear, and there's plenty of legroom in the back as well. The boot space measures a sizable 504 litres. Stow the split-fold 60/40 second row seats and the space swells to 1,593 litres. So I'd like to just start by saying that I think I should be getting paid double today, because effectively I'm testing two cars at once, and it's slightly doing my head in. The first thing I noticed was that I had 966 kilometres of range. That's not something I've ever seen in an EV before, but then I do have a petrol engine helping me. Then when I started it up, it was silent. I sat there for a little while, thinking about life and how confusing this car is, and then the petrol engine kicked in. When you drive, it feels like an EV. It's got that kind of surging, simple, smooth progression. But if you really put your foot down, the petrol engine kicks in, and there's that sort of natural, familiar feeling that maybe you are driving a petrol car after all. In general terms, it feels very nice on the road. It's very solid. The steering is nice. Everything feels familiar. But I do find that I'm distracted by thinking, who's doing what here? Is the petrol engine working? What's going on? So occasionally I'm watching the screens in front of me, try to work it out. Is my battery going down? Does that matter? Should I look at the fuel gauge? And I've still got 912 kilometres of range. It's all bafflingly wonderful. So this Qashqai feels planted, quality, European, very nice. But why would you buy this particular e-power version? I'm sure the petrol internal combustion engine version is very nice as well. But why would you buy the e-power? I guess what Nissan is suggesting is that you want a car that feels like an electric vehicle to drive. That kind of surging instant acceleration, the smoothness, the quietness, which you do get most of the time. But you can also select the e-pedal mode, just like on a Nissan Leaf, which allows you to drive pretty much without using the brake at all. The regen means you can just come off the throttle, the car slows down. Some people find that very easy. I find it slightly boring, but each to their own. The question is, if you're buying an EV generally, people don't do that because they love the way they drive. It's because they want to be a green warrior. They want to save the world. They want a zero emission vehicle. Now clearly this is not going to be a zero emission vehicle, and nor will the petrol economy figure be 0.0 as it would in an EV. So that means the petrol economy in this car is going to be a very important part of sealing the deal. Nissan claims that it's around mid 5 litres per 100 kilometres. And when we started off on this journey, the trip computer was telling me we're averaging 10s. But it's been mostly freeway driving so far, and it's now averaging, sure enough, 5.8 litres per 100 kilometres. So that, along with the price of the car, which we don't know yet, will be a very important part of why you might buy an e-power rather than a normal Qashqai or a Nissan Leaf. Now Nissan says that you get 100% of torque from 0 RPM in this thing, but the more I've driven it, the more I realise that's not quite the case. Off a standing start, it doesn't actually throw you back in your seat the way even a Leaf would. It really kicks in about 20 or 30 kilometres an hour. It's smooth, it's not a tortoise, but it's just not the instant kind of punch you get from an EV. So it's an EV-like drive, but not exactly the same. But you'd expect that when you're running it on petrol. One clever touch is what Nissan calls linear tune. Basically, if you accelerate hard and the engine needs to kick in to send more power to the inverter, it always revs appropriately, in a rising, singing fashion. The petrol engine's revs match your road speed, basically, even though logically they might not always need to, as you're pulling power out of the battery anyway. But Nissan wanted it to feel like a normal car, and that works. So the fuel figure is unusually important here with the e-power. If you're going to buy this variant, surely at some level you're doing it to reduce your carbon footprint, although not as much as you would by buying an actual EV. Nissan claims 5.3 litres per 100 kilometres and a CO2 rating of 119 grams per kilometre. We drove various cars over our day in Sweden, a place where people drive as if there's a speed camera hiding around every bend, because there usually is. And we found our economy figures were pretty much bang on in the mid-5s. A brief bit of enthusiastic cornering pushed that up to 7 litres per 100 kilometres on one drive, but if you drove the Qashqai e-power the way hybrids are intended, using EV-only mode in the city for example, you could probably better the claimed figure a lot of the time. Qashqai scored a 5-star rating in Euro NCAP but is yet to be tested in Australia. The Qashqai scored highly in the adult and child occupant protection tests with a 91% result, but truly excelled in the safety assist category. The Qashqai e-power is likely to be covered by the standard 5-year unlimited kilometre warranty that Nissan offers in Australia. While the Nissan Leaf comes with an 8-year 160,000 kilometre warranty on its battery, it seems unlikely that the Nissan Qashqai e-Power will match that when it arrives in Australia. At this point in Europe, with e-Power is already on sale, its battery is only covered by a 5-year 160,000 kilometre warranty. If you ask Nissan whether this Qashqai is a hybrid, they'll say no, it's an e-Power. But of course it is a hybrid, it's just a radical new kind of hybrid. What it is though is a car for realists. This is for people who think they want an EV, but realise that the charging infrastructure isn't there yet. It's for people who toyed with the idea of a plug-in hybrid, but realise they won't actually ever get around to plugging it in. And the good news is that it works. It's smooth, it's quiet, it's nice to drive. It feels like an EV. It doesn't have an annoying CVT that will drive you bonkers. And it means you can have a kind of EV with good fuel economy without doing too much to change your life. It's like being a vegan who eats bacon.